a quiet archive record. Tonight, we're stepping into a slow unfolding. Settle in, let the outside world dissolve, and gently descend into tonight's world. In this record, we take a careful look at a strange idea that sits beside the usual story of alien visitors. Instead of ships from other stars, some people think the unknown objects in our skies may come from somewhere that is not a place in our normal sense. They may be interdimensional, meaning they belong to a layer of reality we do not normally see. Others suggest a related twist, that some encounters could involve humans from the future, moving through time in ways we do not yet understand. We will define these ideas in simple terms, compare them to the extraterrestrial theory, and walk through the cases, patterns, and arguments that make some researchers take them seriously, while also staying clear about the limits of the evidence. Tonight, we go through the interdimensional beings theory. Begin with the word itself, interdimensional. It sounds like a science fiction word, but it points to a plain question. What if the world has more structure than our senses can pick up? What if there are parts of reality that touch ours, but do not sit inside our usual 3 dimensions of space and one of time in the way we experience them? A simple way to picture it is to imagine a flat world, a world of paper where tiny beings live as drawings. They can move left and right, forward and back, but they have no concept of up. If you, a 3-dimensional being, place a finger through the paper, what would the paper beings see? They would not see a full finger. They would see a circle appear from nowhere. The circle might grow as more of your finger passes through, then shrink, then vanish. To them, the object would seem to arrive without crossing any distance in their world. It would not come from the horizon. It would not travel in a straight line across their land. It would simply be there. This analogy is used often, and it is not proof of anything, but it helps define the idea. If there are higher dimensions or other domains that overlap with our own, then a thing could appear, disappear, shift shape, or move in ways that look impossible to us while still being normal motion from its own point of view. When people say interdimensional beings, they can mean a few different things. One meaning is literal physics, a being that exists in a space with more dimensions than we normally use. It might be able to move through those extra directions, the way we can move up and down stairs, while a drawing on paper cannot. Another meaning is parallel worlds, not higher dimensions as directions, but separate branches of reality, like a stack of pages. In some theories, these worlds can be close, maybe even connected in rare ways. A visitor could come from a nearby branch. A third meaning is less physical and more mental. Some writers use interdimensional as a way to talk about altered states, visions, or experiences that feel real but might be produced by the mind. This is a different claim, and it changes the whole question of evidence. And then there is the time traveler idea. Humans from the future. This can fit inside the interdimensional frame, or stand beside it. If time is not a simple straight road, then a future group could find a way to move across it, or to step into a different branch of history. The reason these ideas show up in the UAP conversation is not because they are easy. They show up because some reported features do not sit well with the most common story, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The extraterrestrial hypothesis says that the visitors are from another planet in our universe. They traveled here through space using advanced technology. They are physical. They arrive, they observe, they leave. This is possible in principle. The universe is huge. There may be many planets with life. Some could be older than us by millions of years. But the problems start when people look at the details in certain reports. One problem is speed and motion. Some reports describe objects that accelerate extremely fast with no visible engine, no exhaust, and no sonic boom, even when moving at high speed in air. Some describe sudden right-angle turns that would crush a human body. Another problem is appearance and behavior. Some objects are described as changing shape, or blinking in and out, or merging and splitting. Some do not behave like a craft traveling from A to B. They behave like something that is playing with the rules of visibility. Another problem is the strange mix of the close and the far. If the visitors came from light years away, why do so many encounters look small, local, almost personal? Why do some stories involve bedrooms, strange lights in a room, and short experiences that feel more like a dream, yet leave physical traces or shared memories? And then there is the idea of a control system. Some researchers, like Jacques Vallée, have suggested that the phenomenon shapes itself to culture. It changes masks across history. In medieval times, people spoke of fairies, angels, demons, and luminous beings. In the modern era, people speak of aliens and spacecraft. The core experiences have similarities, but the surface story adapts. If that is true, it could mean the phenomenon is not simply travelers from another planet. It could be something that uses symbols, or that appears in ways that fit the expectations and fears of the time. Vallée did not claim to have the final answer, but he pushed the question in a different direction. He asked whether the phenomenon is more like a system interacting with human perception and society, rather than a group of pilots from another star. This is where the interdimensional idea becomes attractive to some people. It gives a place to put these odd features, not in a far star, but in a nearby layer. Before we go deeper, it helps to name the main competing theories, because the interdimensional model is often confused with them. One is the extraterrestrial theory, as we said. Another is the secret human technology theory. The idea that what people see are classified aircraft and drones. This can explain some sightings, and it is always part of the mix. But it has trouble with older cases, with patterns across decades, and with the most extreme performance claims. Another is misidentification. Planets, stars, balloons, birds, drones, camera artifacts, sensor glitches. This also explains a lot of reports. Most UAP reports likely have ordinary causes. Another is the psychological or cultural theory. The idea that people misremember, dream, or tell stories that spread like myths. This also happens, especially in waves of media attention. And then there is a group of theories that are not about aliens or secrets, but about the nature of reality. Interdimensional, time travelers, parallel worlds, simulation, or some unknown intelligence that is native to Earth in a way we have not recognized. The interdimensional theory can be stated in a careful way and in a careless way. The careless way is to say they are from another dimension, so anything goes. That is not useful. The careful way is to say there may be unknown phenomena that interact with our world, and some reports show features that could match an origin that is not simply far away in space. To make that careful version work, we need to ask what evidence would even look like. If an object is physical and leaves traces, we can test materials, radiation, heat, chemical residues, or pressure marks. If the key feature is the experience itself, then we need patterns across witnesses, and we need to compare those patterns to known psychology. If the claim is about higher dimensions, then the evidence is harder. We do not have a simple tool that measures a dimension the way a ruler measures length. So most arguments for interdimensional origin are indirect. They are arguments from fit. They say, this theory fits the weird parts better. Let us walk through some of the weird parts. First, the sudden appearance and disappearance. Many reports describe lights that appear, move, then vanish as if switched off. This could be distance, an angle, clouds, or the object turning its light away. But some cases describe vanishing on radar and visually in clear air, with multiple observers. If a craft is flying away, it should get smaller and dimmer gradually. If it vanishes sharply, it suggests either a technology of concealment or a shift out of our detectable range. Second, the lack of sound. Some low-altitude reports describe large objects that are silent. A helicopter, a plane, even a drone has sound. Silence does not prove another dimension, but it is one more mismatch with common machinery. Third, the distortion effects. Some witnesses report that the air around the object looked wrong, like heat shimmer, or that the object seemed to blur or to be partly transparent. Again, these can be perception errors, but they also resemble what you might expect if something is not fully in our space, or if it is using a field that bends light. Fourth, the close encounter entity reports. This is the hardest area, and also the most controversial. People report beings. Small figures, large eyes, strange suits, or sometimes more human-looking visitors, almost like a theatre costume. If you try to force all of these into the extraterrestrial box, you end up with too many species and too many styles, without a clear reason. If you consider that the phenomenon may present itself through a filter, or may adapt to expectation, then the variety becomes less of a problem. This is where the comparison to folklore becomes important. Across history, people have reported beings that take them, show them strange places, perform procedures, and return them. In older times, the story was fairies or spirits. In modern times, it is aliens. The interdimensional theory can connect these. It can say, the core event is contact with something that is not from our normal social world, and the mind and culture shape the narrative. This can be true in more than one way. It could be that the beings are real and choose the mask. It could be that the beings are not real in a physical sense, but that the experience is real to the person and has consistent structure. Or it could be that there is a mix. Some events are physical, some are psychological, and the whole topic is a messy pile. Now consider the time traveler branch. The time traveler idea often comes up because some descriptions of beings and craft do not feel alien in the way people imagine aliens. They sometimes feel like future humans. Small bodies, large heads, big eyes. A body shaped by a long time of life in controlled environments. Less sunlight, more screen time, more genetic selection. This is speculative and can drift into fantasy fast, but it is a way some people try to explain why the beings, in many stories, are humanoid. If they evolved on another planet, why would they look like us? If they are us, changed by time, then the shape makes more sense. But then we face the problem of time travel itself. Is it possible? Modern physics allows strange solutions in general relativity, called closed time-like curves. where time loops back on itself. Wormholes, if they existed and could be stabilized, might allow paths that return to an earlier time. These ideas are mathematical, not practical. They also require exotic conditions, like negative energy density, that we do not know how to create. There is also the paradox problem. If you go back and change the past, do you erase your own future? Some approaches avoid paradoxes by saying you cannot change the past, you can only fulfill it. This is the self-consistency principle. Another approach avoids paradoxes by branching. If you go back, you create or enter a new timeline. Your original timeline remains. You do not erase yourself, you just create a fork. If a future human group could travel, they might also be able to travel between branches. That would make them not just time travelers, but dimension travelers in the parallel world sense. So the time traveler theory often becomes a type of interdimensional theory. Now let us look at specific modern events that are often used as evidence, not to prove the theory, but to motivate it. One set of events is the US Navy encounters, like the 2004 Nimitz case and later reports. In the Nimitz story, pilots reported a white object, like a tic-tac, with strange motion. There were radar tracks. The object seemed to move in ways that challenged known aircraft limits. Some people interpret these events as secret tech. Some interpret them as extraterrestrial craft. Interdimensional proponents point to the way the object moved and appeared, and to the way it seemed to anticipate or respond to the pilots. They suggest it behaved less like a vehicle and more like an intruding presence. Another set of events is the pattern of lights and orbs. Orbs are reported across cultures and times. Small spheres of light, sometimes inside homes, sometimes near people, sometimes following cars. Some may be ball lightning or electrical phenomena, but some reports include intelligent-seeming movement, turning corners, waiting, approaching, and backing away. If these are physical craft, they are tiny. If they are not craft, they are something else. Interdimensional ideas are often used here because a small bright orb that appears and disappears is similar to the finger through the paper analogy, a cross-section of something larger. Another category is the so-called high strangeness cases. High strangeness means the event includes multiple weird elements. Not just a light in the sky, but missing time, odd dreams, poltergeist-like events, telepathic impressions, and long-lasting psychological impact. Researchers like Valley took these seriously as data, even if they did not accept every story as true. He noticed that the more bizarre cases often involved a message, or a trickster style, a mix of awe and confusion, sometimes nonsense elements. This led him to suggest the phenomenon may be a control system, a kind of feedback that influences culture and belief. In that frame, interdimensional is not only about geometry, it is about access to mind, access to attention. Now consider older events. In 1561, there is a famous woodcut from Nuremberg describing a sky battle of strange objects. In 1896 and 1897, there were airship waves in the United States with reports of strange craft and odd occupants. In 1947 and after, the modern UFO era begins. The surface form changes. The core theme remains. Something in the sky, something strange, witnesses trying to make sense of it. If it were one group of extraterrestrials, we might expect a more stable presentation. But if it is something that adapts, the variety makes more sense. However, we need to be careful. Human storytelling also adapts. People borrow from newspapers, radio, and now the internet. So a changing story is not proof of a changing phenomenon. This is why the interdimensional theory remains a theory. It is an attempt to explain patterns, not a solved case. Let us slow down and define what counts as evidence in this area. Evidence can be physical, a radar record, a video, a trace on the ground. Evidence can be testimonial, multiple independent witnesses, trained observers, consistent reports. Evidence can be pattern-based, similar features across cases, across time, across cultures. But evidence is not the same as proof. And in UAP studies, the gap between evidence and proof is large. Videos can be misleading, sensors can glitch, witnesses can be honest and still wrong. So the best approach is layered. We treat most simple sightings as unknowns that will likely become known with more data. We treat a small number of strong cases as worthy of deeper study, and we keep the big theories, like interdimensional origin, as provisional maps, not final answers. Now we can ask what the interdimensional theory explains better than the extraterrestrial theory. 1. It explains apparent violations of inertia and aerodynamics by moving the action into a domain where our rules are incomplete. 2. It explains the weird mix of physical and mental features in close encounters. 3. It explains why the phenomenon may appear throughout history in different guises. 4. It explains why the phenomenon might be local, tied to Earth, tied to people, rather than a distant expedition. And 5. It gives a framework for why the phenomenon might seem to respond to attention. Some researchers claim that UAP appear more often to certain people, or in certain states of mind, or around certain practices like meditation. This is hard to test and can attract fantasy, but it is part of the data set people discuss. If the phenomenon is interdimensional, and if it can interact with mind, then attention could matter. This idea is sometimes called the hitchhiker effect, the claim that after a close encounter, strange events continue around the person, even far from the original location. Skeptics argue this is stress, sleep disturbance, anxiety, and pattern finding. Believers argue the pattern is too consistent to ignore. The interdimensional theory is used to explain it because it allows for an intelligence that attaches, follows, or stays connected through means we do not understand. Now, what are the weaknesses of the interdimensional theory? First, it can become uncatchable. If anything weird can be explained by another dimension, then the theory stops being testable. Second, it relies on physics we do not have. Higher dimensions are used in some theoretical physics, like string theory, but they are not confirmed in the way a table is confirmed. Third, it can blur into spiritual language. Some people merge it with demons, angels, or religious frameworks. That may be meaningful to them, but it changes the domain of discussion. Fourth, it can distract from simpler explanations. Many sightings are just balloons, drones, and misread sensors. So a responsible approach to this idea is humble. It says, maybe, and it lists what would change our mind. What would change our mind if we get clear physical artifacts with clear origin? If we get repeatable measurements of a craft doing impossible motion? If we get a clear link between certain conditions and appearances, like a consistent way to trigger a sighting? If we get a strong pattern in radar and optical data that matches a model better than any aircraft model? Now let us go deeper into what interdimensional could mean in physics terms without getting lost. In modern physics, dimensions are not just directions. They are degrees of freedom. We live in 3 spatial dimensions. We can move in them freely. We also experience time. Some theories propose extra dimensions that are curled up and small, hidden at very tiny scales. If those extra dimensions exist, they usually do not allow large objects to pop in and out. They are more like hidden structure at the smallest level. So when UAP researchers say interdimensional, they usually are not making a strict string theory claim. They are using the word to describe a kind of adjacent reality. That adjacent reality could be a parallel universe, a different layer, or a different domain of physics. One could imagine a craft that uses a field to change its interaction with space and time, like warping space-time, reducing inertia, or changing mass. That would not be another dimension, strictly. It would be advanced physics. But to a witness, it could look like magic. So the interdimensional label sometimes covers 2 ideas. One is literal other realm. The other is technology so advanced it makes an object seem to blink, move, and vanish in impossible ways. In that sense, interdimensional can be a placeholder for we do not know. Now consider the role of consciousness. There is a long history of researchers noticing that some experiences include telepathy, or a sense of a message. The beings do not always speak with mouths. The witness feels ideas placed in the mind. This is reported in some abduction narratives and contact events. If you take these reports as literal, it implies a technology or ability to interface with the brain. If you take them as psychological, it implies the experience is dreamlike. The interdimensional theory is attractive because it can allow both, a contact that is partly physical and partly mental. But again, we must be careful. The brain can generate vivid experiences. Sleep paralysis can create beings in a room. Trauma can create memory distortions. So to treat these reports as evidence, we need controls. Multiple witnesses in the same event. Physical traces. Timestamps. Medical checks. Most cases do not have these. So the interdimensional model remains more of a narrative frame than a scientific conclusion. Now let us compare it directly to the extraterrestrial theory, point by point. Distance. Extraterrestrial travel requires crossing light years. It is not impossible, but it is hard. Interdimensional access, if it exists, might not require long travel. It could be local. Motives. Extraterrestrials could have motives like exploration, study, or even colonization. Interdimensional beings could have motives that are harder to imagine, like experiments on perception, long-term influence, or something not aligned with our ideas. History. Extraterrestrials could have visited many times, but the changing style is odd. Interdimensional beings could adapt their appearance to culture, making the history of folklore relevant. Evidence. Extraterrestrial craft would be physical and should be measurable. Interdimensional phenomena might be partly measurable and partly elusive. This makes it harder to prove. Now let us bring in a few famous researchers and how they frame the question. Jacques Vallée is central. He studied cases and databases. He worked with J. Allen Hynek, who began as a skeptic with Project Blue Book. Vallée argued that the phenomenon has a long history and includes physical effects and absurd elements. He suggested it may be a system that interacts with humans. He did not rule out extraterrestrials, but he thought it was too simple. Another researcher, John Keel, wrote about the trickster nature of the phenomenon. Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial, meaning something that is from Earth or near Earth but not human. Ultra-terrestrial is similar in spirit to interdimensional. It points to a nearby hidden intelligence. Another modern angle is the idea of a shadow biosphere, life that exists here but is based on different chemistry, or lives in a way we do not detect. This is not interdimensional, but it is another local origin idea. And then there is the simulation idea. If reality is a simulation, then UAP could be glitches, or admin tools, or test objects. This is also speculative and hard to test, but it shares a theme with interdimensional. The theme that what we see is not the full structure. Now consider the human from the future idea again. If some UAP are human tech from the future, what would we expect? We might expect the craft to look engineered, but strange. We might expect interest in military events, because the future might be trying to prevent war. We might expect avoidance of direct contact to avoid changing history. We might expect patterns near nuclear sites, because nuclear war is a big pivot point. Interestingly, there are many reports of UAP near nuclear facilities, missile silos, and nuclear-powered ships. This is sometimes used as evidence of interest, but it can also be explained by surveillance, by misidentification, and by the fact that military sites are watched carefully. So again, it is suggestive, not decisive. The time traveler theory also runs into a simple problem. If future humans can travel back, why are they so secret? Why not leave clear proof? One answer is that they cannot leave proof without causing harm. Another is that what we see is not the travelers, but their tools, like drones. Another is that the events are not planned visits, but accidental leaks, or that we are misunderstanding. Now, one reason interdimensional and time traveler theories feel appealing is that they match a certain emotional tone of the reports. Many witnesses describe the experience as uncanny, not just foreign, but wrong, as if the world itself changed for a moment, lights too bright, silence too deep, time feeling stretched. This uncanny tone is common in folklore as well. Encounters with fairies, with spirits, with strange men on the road. Time slips, hours passing like minutes, or minutes passing like hours. If there is any truth to these patterns, it suggests the phenomenon may involve time and perception, not just travel. This is where the interdimensional model can connect to time travel and missing time. If an event involves a bubble of altered time, then a person could lose time. In physics, time dilation exists near strong gravity and high speeds. In technology, we have no way to create a local time bubble, but an advanced system might. Again, we are in speculation. The point is not to claim this is what happens, but to show why some people think the interdimensional model fits. Now let us talk about evidence in the form of data, especially the modern push for sensor fusion. In military contexts, you can have radar, infrared, optical, and human observation. If a UAP is seen by multiple sensors at once, the chance of simple error drops. But sensors can also have correlated errors, and software can misclassify. The best cases are those with multiple types of data and clear calibration. Many public cases do not have full data released, so the public debate often becomes a debate about trust. Do you trust the pilots? Do you trust the radar tech? Do you trust the government? This is not ideal for science. A true test would involve open data and repeatable observation. Now we can ask if the interdimensional theory offers any predictions. A prediction could be that the phenomenon will continue to adapt to culture. Another could be that the phenomenon will show up in liminal places, borders, edges, like near water, mountains, deserts, and in the sky at dusk. Another could be that the phenomenon will cluster around attention and story. But these are soft predictions. They are hard to measure. A stronger prediction would involve a physical signature. For example, if objects are appearing by shifting in phase with our space, they might produce electromagnetic effects. Some reports include car engines stalling, radios failing, and other electrical effects. This could be coincidence, or it could be a real interaction. If it is real, then it could be measured in future incidents. This is an area where careful fieldwork could help. Now let us pause and consider the simplest truth. Most UAP reports are not evidence of interdimensional beings. They are evidence that people see things they cannot identify quickly. That is normal. But within that large pile, there may be a small number of cases that point to something new. The challenge is to separate the signal from the noise. And that is where the interdimensional theory can be both helpful and harmful. Helpful because it opens the mind to possibilities beyond the usual. Harmful because it can make people stop looking for normal explanations. So the calm approach is to hold the theory lightly. Now, in many discussions, the interdimensional idea is supported by the strange overlap between UAP stories and what people report in psychedelic states, near-death experiences, and deep meditation. Some people say they meet beings. Some say the beings communicate. Some say the beings show them symbols. This is not strong evidence for external beings. The brain can create beings, but it is part of the landscape. If there is any connection, it could be one of two things. Either the states of mind open perception to something real, or the states of mind produce a similar kind of internal narrative, and UAP stories borrow that structure. The interdimensional theory tends to lean toward the first. The skeptical view tends to lean toward the second. The honest view may be that we do not know. Now let us talk about one more concept that appears in interdimensional discussions. The idea of a filter. We do not perceive everything. We perceive what keeps us alive. We do not see most electromagnetic radiation. We do not hear most frequencies. We do not feel magnetic fields in a direct way. So it is possible that there are phenomena around us that we do not register. Most of those phenomena are not intelligent beings. But the idea of a filter reminds us that we are not built to perceive truth. We are built to survive. If an intelligence existed in a domain we cannot sense, it could be around us without being noticed. Only when it chooses to cross the boundary would we see it. This idea fits some reports of beings walking through walls or appearing in rooms. Again, those reports may be dreams or false memories, but this is the frame. Now consider a question that often gets asked. If the beings are interdimensional, why do we see craft at all? Why not just see lights, shadows, or nothing? One answer is that the craft are not ships. They are the interface, like a diving suit, or like a tool, a device that allows the beings to operate in our environment. If that is true, then the craft may not need to be aerodynamic, because it is not a plane. It may be a projector, a stabilizer, a portal device. This idea is common in some speculative circles. It is not verified, but it is a coherent way to explain why the craft sometimes look absurd. Now let us bring in the idea of portals and wormholes. In science fiction, a portal is a doorway from one place to another. In physics, a wormhole is a hypothetical tunnel through space-time. If a wormhole could be created, it might connect distant places or even different times. If UAP were using wormholes, then sudden appearances would make sense. But creating a wormhole is beyond our technology and likely requires exotic energy. Still, as a narrative, it ties together the ideas: interdimensional, time travel, portals. Now, what about evidence of portals? Some witnesses report seeing a ring of light, a window, or a distortion. Some report objects emerging from a cloud that looked unnatural. But these reports are not easy to verify. Again, they add to the fit, not the proof. Now let us take a calm walk through a few case types often used in these discussions. First, the classic landing cases. A craft is seen on the ground. There are marks. There may be burns. There may be effects on plants. These are interesting because they produce physical data. In some cases, the data is weak. In others, it is suggestive. If the phenomenon is interdimensional, it can still land. It can still interact with soil. So these cases do not distinguish between extraterrestrial and interdimensional. They simply show physical interaction. Second, the closing counter cases with beings. These are the ones where the folklore comparison matters. If beings show up across centuries with similar themes, that suggests a stable core. But it could also be a stable human story pattern. The trickster theme, the procedures, the warnings. Third, the military observation cases. These matter because they involve trained observers and sensors. If a UAP is tracked and performs extreme maneuvers, that suggests advanced tech or data error. Interdimensional theory is used as a way to avoid the need for a craft that survives high G-forces. If the object is partly outside our space, maybe the motion is not motion in the usual way. Fourth, the abduction and missing time cases. These are often linked to time travel ideas because the person experiences time distortions. But sleep paralysis and dreams can also create missing time. Fifth, the recurring location cases. Some places have repeated reports, like certain valleys, ridges, or lakes. This could be geography for observation. It could be cultural story clusters. It could be natural phenomena. Or, in interdimensional terms, it could be a thin spot, a place where the boundary is easier to cross. This idea is common in folklore too. Thin places. Now, one of the best ways to keep this topic grounded is to separate three questions. 1. Are there unknown objects in our airspace that represent advanced technology? 2. Are any of those objects controlled by non-human intelligence? 3. If non-human, are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or something else? You can answer yes to the first and still be unsure about the second and third. Many people leap from unknown to aliens, and then from aliens to interdimensional. But the chain is not firm. Now let us bring in the social side. Why do these theories spread? Partly because people want an explanation, partly because secrecy and lack of data create a vacuum, and partly because the stories are powerful. Interdimensional theories are especially compelling because they turn the UAP question into a question about reality itself, not just visitors, but the structure of existence. This can be thrilling. It can also be dangerous because it can pull people into belief systems without evidence. So we return again to calm language. Maybe, unknown, possible, not proven. Now, if you were a scientist trying to test interdimensional claims, what would you do? You would set up monitoring stations in areas with frequent reports. You would use multiple sensors, calibrated. You would record electromagnetic fields, radiation, optical and infrared video. You would record weather and lightning. You would use human observers with training. And you would try to catch repeat events. If events repeat, we can test. If they do not repeat, we can only collect stories. Some groups have tried this, but the field is still small. Now let us circle back to the title, the interdimensional beings theory. It is a theory, not a fact. It is a way to interpret a messy set of reports. It is built from analogies, from patterns, from history, and from the sense that something about the phenomenon is not like normal vehicles. It borrows from physics language, but it is not yet physics. It borrows from folklore, but it is not simply myth. It sits on the border, and borders are where the mind tends to invent. So, in the quiet way of this archive, we can say the most honest thing. There are reports that we cannot fully explain. There are patterns that are strange. There are ideas that might fit. And there is still a long distance between story and certainty. If the visitors are extraterrestrial, then we are part of a larger universe of life. If the visitors are interdimensional, then reality is deeper than we assumed. If the visitors are future humans, then our future has found a way back, and our history may be watched by our own descendants. And if the visitors are none of these, then the real answer is something we have not yet imagined. For now, the archive keeps the record. It holds the definitions. It holds the cases. It holds the arguments. And it holds the doubt. Because in mysteries like this, doubt is not weakness. It is the guardrail that keeps us from falling into fantasy. And still, even with doubt, we can let the mind wander. Not to believe, but to explore. Not to claim, but to ask. Now, as the story continues in your mind, slow the pace. Let each idea arrive and pass. A craft that is not a craft. A visitor that is not from far away, but from beside. A signal that is not a message in words, but a pressure on attention. A history of lights and beings and strange nights, stretching across centuries, and through it all, the simple human act of looking up at the dark sky, seeing something move, feeling that small spark of wonder, then turning back, telling a friend, and finding that the world is larger than it looked a moment ago. In the end, the interdimensional beings theory is a mirror as much as it is a claim. It reflects our desire to make sense of the unknown. It reflects our fear that we are not alone. It reflects our hope that the universe, or the layers of reality, contain more than our daily routines. And it reflects our limits. We are young, we are curious, we are easily fooled, and we are capable of careful thought. So we keep the questions open. We keep the data close. We keep the language calm, and we wait for better evidence. Because one clear piece of evidence can do more than 1,000 theories. Until then, the archive does what archives do. It preserves, it compares, it notes the strange repetitions, and it lets the mind rest. And while we are here, it is worth looking at how these theories overlap and split. Some people say interdimensional beings. Some say ultra-terrestrials. Some say time travelers. Some say the phenomenon is a kind of intelligence tied to Earth, like an ancient neighbor. These sound different, but they often point to the same dissatisfaction with the simplest alien visitor picture. They also often begin from the same set of observations. The observation that the phenomenon does not act like a normal expedition. The observation that it is not consistent. the observation that it is sometimes absurd, the observation that it sometimes feels personal, and the observation that it can leave a witness with a deep sense of meaning, even when the surface details are unclear. Now let us talk about the difference between a theory that is useful and a theory that is just a story. A useful theory has boundaries. It says what it can explain and what it cannot. It says what evidence would count for it and what evidence would count against it. So, for the interdimensional beings theory, we can set a few boundaries. First boundary: it does not explain every strange light. It is not needed for a distant aircraft light seen through haze. It is not needed for a balloon. It is not needed for a drone. So, if a report has a clear, ordinary explanation, we do not drag it into this theory. Second boundary: it is not a replacement for data. It is a way to interpret data. If there is no data, only a story, then the theory should be used lightly. Third boundary: it is not a claim that every spiritual story is literally true. It is a claim that some experiences across time might have a shared source that is not simple misidentification. Now, what would count as evidence against it? If strong evidence emerged that the main UAP cases were all human technology, if clear documentation and physical proof showed secret programs that matched the best reports across decades, then the interdimensional model would not be needed. Another thing that would weaken it is a clear extraterrestrial artifact, a recovered device with a clear origin from another solar system, or a clear signal that contains information that could only come from a distant planet. In that case, the simplest answer might be extraterrestrials. But even then, it would not fully erase the interdimensional idea, because the data set includes many kinds of events. One possibility is that more than one thing is happening. That idea is not satisfying, but it might be true. We can have misidentifications. We can have secret aircraft. We can have natural rare phenomena. And we could also have a small number of events that are truly unknown. Now, when people talk about evidence that points toward an interdimensional origin, they often bring up a few repeating themes. Theme 1 is the trickster pattern. The phenomenon does not always behave like a cautious observer. It sometimes behaves like a prank. It shows itself, then hides. It leads people on. It creates confusion. It leaves clues that do not add up. This is a theme in Vallee's writing. He noted that many events include an element that seems designed to disrupt certainty. A witness sees something clear. Then the next detail becomes absurd. A message is given, but it is vague. A prediction is made, but it is partly wrong. To a skeptic, this means the witness is unreliable. To a believer in an interdimensional intelligence, it can mean the intelligence is shaping the event in a controlled way. Theme 2 is the absurd variety of forms. One decade, the craft looks like an airship. Another decade, it looks like a saucer. Another, it looks like a triangle. Another, it looks like a tic-tac. And the beings also change. This is not impossible under the extraterrestrial idea. A group could change designs. But the way it mirrors human imagination is striking. So the interdimensional idea suggests that the form may be a mask. Not always, but sometimes. Theme 3 is the way the phenomenon interacts with place. There are areas of repeated activity, not just military bases, also rural zones, hills, certain coasts. Some people call them hotspots. If you treat this as interdimensional, you can imagine a kind of access point, a place where something crosses, a place where the boundary is easier. This is similar to old stories of thin places. Again, it could also be human attention and reporting. So it is not proof, but it is a pattern. Theme 4 is the connection to water. There are many reports of objects entering the ocean or rising from it. Some modern military reports include this theme. This leads to other theories, like underwater bases, but it can also fit an interdimensional model, a boundary between environments, a place where senses are weaker, a place that feels like a doorway. Theme 5 is the confusion about scale. Some witnesses describe very large craft. Others describe tiny orbs. Some describe craft that seem bigger on the inside. This last detail is rare and hard to trust, but it appears. If space itself can be manipulated, or if an object is not fully in our space, then size could be misleading. Now let us take a slow look at the human from the future angle again, and be honest about why it sticks. It sticks because it offers a motive that feels close. If the visitors are future humans, they may be here because of us, because of our choices, because of disasters we might cause, because of wars we might start, because of technology that changes everything. A future group might be trying to observe key points, like a historian in a time machine, or they might be trying to nudge, or they might be trying to prevent a collapse. This idea is emotionally powerful, but emotional power is not evidence. So we ask what actual patterns might support it. One pattern often mentioned is nuclear interest. Reports of UAP around nuclear weapons sites, reports of missile shutdowns, reports of bright objects hovering near silos. If true, this suggests the phenomenon cares about our most dangerous tools. That could fit extraterrestrials. It could fit interdimensional beings. It could fit time travelers. It could also fit spying by human adversaries. So by itself, it does not decide the question. Another pattern is the humanoid look. Many alleged beings are described as small and thin, with large heads. If you imagine a long-term future of humans, you can spin a story. Less physical labor, more indoor living, different diets, genetic changes. This can produce a being that looks like a stylized version of us. But again, this is story. A skeptic can say the beings look like modern media aliens because the witness borrowed the image. So we stay cautious. Now, we can consider a more grounded version of the future human idea. Instead of bodies visiting, it could be probes, autonomous devices sent back, drones that watch, machines that do not carry living passengers. This would also explain why the craft could take extreme maneuvers. A machine can survive more than a body. If that is the case, then the beings are not the main point. The main point is the technology. Still, the idea of time travel remains difficult, but difficult is not the same as impossible. 100 years ago, many things we do today would look like magic. So we keep the idea open, but not dominant. Now let us compare interdimensional and future human theories to one more competing idea, the extraterrestrial theory. The extraterrestrial theory has one big advantage. It is simple. It says, life is elsewhere, and some of it came here. That is an easy story. It also fits our habit of thinking in place and distance, but it has a weakness. It assumes that the main unknown is travel, that the visitors solved travel, then they came, then everything else follows. In many reports, the weird part is not travel. The weird part is behavior. The weird part is contact. The weird part is meaning. So for those who focus on that aspect, interdimensional ideas become more attractive. Now, a person might ask a fair question. If interdimensional beings exist, why are they interested in us? Why now? Why lights in the sky? Why these strange encounters? There are many possible answers, and none are verified. They could be studying. They could be feeding on attention. They could be performing tests. They could be monitoring the planet. They could be using Earth as a resource. They could be using humans as part of a long project. Or they could be indifferent, and we are misreading random crossings as intent. The last option is important. Not every unknown phenomenon is intelligent. It could be that what crosses is like weather, a natural leak between domains. If that were true, then the lights and orbs could be natural events that we interpret as craft. This is a less discussed but interesting variation. Interdimensional does not have to mean beings with plans. It can mean phenomena. But the theory Raphael asked for is specifically about beings or intelligences, so we keep our focus there. Now we can take a brief tour of the kinds of evidence that people in this field often point to, not to prove, but to show what they consider meaningful. First, multiple witness cases. A single witness can be mistaken, but when multiple witnesses see the same object at the same time from different angles, the chance of a shared illusion drops. Second, multiple sensor cases. Radar plus infrared plus visual. Third, physical trace cases. Marks on the ground, changes in plants. Radiation. Fourth, long-term pattern cases, where a region or family reports repeated events over years. Fifth, cross-cultural motif cases, where themes repeat across centuries. Now, each of these categories has weaknesses. Witnesses can influence each other. Sensors can misread. Traces can have ordinary causes. Patterns can be attention and memory. Motifs can be shared human imagination. So the best evidence would be something that combines categories. A multiple sensor case that includes physical traces. And ideally, a recovered object. That is rare. Now, let us speak about one more element that often appears in interdimensional discussions, the idea of mind and message. In many close encounter accounts, the witness reports a sense of communication, a message about the environment, a message about war, a message about human behavior. Sometimes it is moral, sometimes it is confusing, sometimes it is contradictory. Skeptics point out that this looks like human psychology. People under stress generate meaning. People under fear seek a lesson. People in altered states create narratives. Believers point out that some messages include details the witness did not expect, or that multiple witnesses report similar themes. Again, not proof, but part of the pattern. If there is any truth to the interdimensional beings idea, one possibility is that the beings do not communicate like we do. They may not use sound. They may use direct impressions. They may use imagery. And if that is the case, the human brain may translate the experience into a story that fits. This is another way the masks could form. Now let us slow down and imagine the simplest day-to-day way this could work if it were real. Imagine a boundary, a thin layer between our world and another. Most of the time it is closed. Once in a while it opens. When it opens, something crosses. Maybe a probe, maybe a being, maybe a light. If it crosses only partly, we see a glowing sphere. If it crosses more fully, we see a craft. If it gets very close to people, their perception is affected. Time feels strange. Memory becomes foggy. Emotion becomes intense. Some people later interpret that as missing time. Some interpret it as abduction. Some interpret it as a dream. Now this is a story. but it is a story that matches certain reports in a simple way, and that is why it keeps returning. Now, we can also ask why governments might struggle with this topic. If the unknown objects were simple foreign drones, the response would be technical and military. If the unknown objects were extraterrestrial craft, the response would still be technical and military, but also political. But if the unknown objects are something that does not fit normal categories, then the response becomes confused. How do you defend against something that appears and disappears? How do you negotiate with something that may not share language? How do you explain to the public something you do not understand? This can produce secrecy, not only to hide a truth, but to hide confusion. Now, none of this proves the interdimensional beings theory, but it shows why it remains in the conversation. It is an attempt to respect the strangest parts of the reports without forcing them into a simple box. Now, there is one more important comparison we should make. Interdimensional beings versus extraterrestrial beings is not only a difference in origin, it is a difference in how contact would work. If the visitors are extraterrestrial, we can imagine them as another culture. We can imagine their biology. We can imagine their ships. We can imagine their history. We can imagine translation. If the visitors are interdimensional, the problem is deeper. We may not share the same assumptions about space, time, and individuality. We may not be able to perceive them fully. Our attempts to describe them may always be partial. In that case, the best we can do is collect patterns and be careful about our language. And this brings us back to the calm conclusion. We do not have enough to say, this is true. We do have enough to say, some cases are strange. And we can keep a few possible maps. Map 1, extraterrestrials. Map 2, secret human programs. Map 3, natural rare phenomena. Map 4, interdimensional intelligences. Map 5, future human time travel. And Map 6, a mix of more than one. The archive does not choose a map as dogma. It records them, it compares them, it waits, and it keeps a place for future data. Now, as we settle deeper, let the ideas soften. Let the sky become quiet. Let the mind hold the mystery without trying to solve it. A light that arrives without crossing distance. A shape that changes like a shadow. A report that repeats across generations. A question that keeps returning. Are they from far away? Or are they from beside? Are they strangers? Or are they echoes? Are they visitors? Or are they neighbors we have not learned to see? In the quiet archive, we do not force an answer. We let the unknown stay unknown. We note the theories. We note the evidence. We note the gaps. And we let the body rest. Breath slow, thoughts slower. The mind drifting through wide dark space, and through hidden layers, and through time that may not be a straight line at all. And one last slow note before the archive closes for the night. Sometimes, when people debate these theories, they argue as if only one can be true. But reality does not promise to be neat. It is possible that some of what we call UAP is ordinary and misread. It is possible that some of it is human. And it is possible that a small portion is truly outside our current understanding. If that small portion exists, it might not come with a clear label. It might not arrive with a flag. It might not land and give a speech. It might only appear in fragments, a light, a radar track, a sudden acceleration, a strange silence, a witness who cannot find words. This is why careful people in this field tend to focus on process. They focus on documentation. They focus on repeat observations. They focus on separating what was actually observed from what was later imagined. And they focus on staying patient. Because patience is the only way a mystery becomes knowledge. In the interdimensional beings theory, the deepest claim is not about a planet or a star. It is about limits. The limit of our senses, the limit of our instruments, the limit of our categories. It asks whether the world has doors we do not see, and if those doors open sometimes, and if something looks in or steps through. If that is true, then the right attitude is not panic. It is not worship. It is not certainty. It is steady curiosity, a calm willingness to say, we do not know, and a calm willingness to keep watching, to keep asking, to keep building better tools, to keep recording. So the archive places the file back on the shelf. The title remains. The evidence remains incomplete. The theories remain open, and the night remains quiet. And as the last thought fades, you can hold one simple question, very gently. If something can cross into our world without traveling through it in the normal way, how would we even notice? We would notice only the edge, only the brief contact, only the shadow of a larger shape, only the strange behavior at the boundary. That is why so many reports feel like glimpses, and that is why so many theories feel incomplete. We are trying to describe a whole from a thin slice, a circle on a sheet of paper, trying to imagine the hand that touched it. Maybe the hand belongs to travelers from another star. Maybe it belongs to neighbors in a hidden layer. Maybe it belongs to descendants reaching back through time. Or maybe the circle is only wind and light, and the hand was never there at all. The archive does not force a final claim. It only keeps the question steady and the tone calm. If tomorrow brings new data, the archive will adjust. A clearer video, a stronger radar record, a material sample, a better explanation for an old case, or a simple proof that a famous story was only a mistake. Any of these would be progress, because progress is not only finding the strange, it is also removing the false. And with each careful step, the unknown becomes smaller, and the remaining mystery becomes sharper. And for now, that is enough. Enough questions for one night. Enough open doors. Enough careful maybes. The sky remains dark and wide. The theories remain on the shelf, and your attention can drift away from them, slowly, like a light fading at the edge of vision. Rest now, and let the mystery loosen its grip. This was a quiet archive story, where the story ends, sleep begins,